Obviously, this is a pretty controversial topic, and we see a big debate in our society today over this.
It's everyone's choice. If you want an abortion, then you should be able to have that choice for your life and for the sake of that child.
I know there's been a movement recently to kind of roll back some of the Roe versus Wade.
I don't think it's a good thing. I think they're just making laws just to make them now. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they're not really making laws to better the U.S. and they're just making laws just to make them. And
I'm Katie Hardy.
And I'm Grace Farley, and we're here to give you a brief rundown on the abortion laws in the United States.
A flurry of new anti-abortion laws presented by Republican-controlled states this spring has generated a national outcry for and against the laws in response to the controversial topic. Some of these laws are called heartbeat laws, meaning the state has banned termination beyond the time in which a fetus has a heartbeat. According to the European Bioinformatics Institute, this stage of pregnancy is usually around 6 weeks.
6-week-old fetus is starting to differentiate a little bit. It's certainly not fully formed. It does not look like a baby per se, right? And is not necessarily it's not something that would likely survive on its own, right? It's very, very early in development. 2 is 6 weeks is not a very big gap from conception, and so there's probably plenty of women that are 6 weeks pregnant that don't fully realize that they're pregnant at that point. Of course, a woman menstruates once a month, but there's some variation in that, right? Based on diet or whatever else is going on outside of her life, or in her life. And so I think 6 weeks doesn't give you a whole lot of window.
On January 22nd, 1973, the Supreme Court ruled 7-2 in favor of Roe during the landmark Roe v. Wade court case legalizing abortions up until viability at 24 weeks after conception in the United States, according to the Legal Information Institute at Cornell Law School.
This is a major issue for a lot of women because the feeling is that certain laws have been passed that restricted their ability to choose whether or not they wanted to have a child. Kind of coming out of the 1960s civil rights movement, we see the emergence of more of a aggressive stance for women's liberation.
Before Roe versus Wade, it was all decided state by state. So it was not federally illegal, but it was illegal in a number of states, and your ability to access an abortion just completely depended on where you live.
One of the things that was a focus of people that were in favor of Roe versus Wade was to make it safe. I mean, people could go to Canada and get it done legally in Canada, or some left the country, but obviously that required some financial means to be able to do that.
The 10th Amendment reserves powers for the states that aren't specifically given to the federal government. So the Supreme Court ruling in Roe versus Wade said that the Bill of Rights included the right to privacy, which they interpreted as including the right to to control your own medical health and privacy, and the right to abortion. Therefore, they ruled it as protected under federal law. But if they overturn that decision and say that abortion is not one of the things included in the Bill of Rights, then we're back to the interpretation of there being nothing written about it in the Constitution, in which case it's a reserved power that states would have the power to regulate.
On May 7, 2019, Georgia passed its own heartbeat bill and became the first of 8 states to pass an anti-abortion law stricter than its precedent, Roe versus Wade. According to the bill, the Georgian legislature wishes to cite the 14th Amendment, saying on lines 40 and 41, early infants in the womb are a class of living, distinct human beings and hence deserve the civil rights this 14th Amendment enumerates.
And more famously, Alabama passed a similar bill, except with no exceptions for rape, incest, or human trafficking.
Well, I think that would be kind of dumb if they're making you keep your child if you're getting raped, because you have no control if you're having a child or not, if you get raped or sex trafficking or anything like that. So I think that's kind of dumb.
I don't think it's fair for people, because if you're not able to carry the baby or you're not able to afford the life of the baby, you can be raped or anything just happen, you get pregnant and you're not ready for this. And I don't think that people should make people keep the baby if they're not ready. That's just like bringing a child into the world and they're not going to be stable.
I really don't like it at all. It seems pretty bad to me. I don't like, morally, I don't agree with it, but I don't think that it should be made necessarily illegal, and that's like really hard stuff to talk about.
These concerns are raising the question of states' rights versus federal rights, since these laws are directly challenging Supreme Court ruling of Roe v. Wade. Many others in support of these laws, however, are speaking up too in defense of the laws in an argument of pro-choice settlement. Adding to the whirlwind and the consideration of political background, the appointment of 2 Supreme Court justices by Donald Trump and the pivoting platforms of the candidates of the up-and-coming 2020 elections.
It's now seen as possible that they could rule in favor of overturning it, which is why there's this sudden rush to pass so many laws. The Alabama law was crafted really specifically as a challenge to Roe v. Wade. They purposely didn't allow many exceptions, made it pretty absolute because they wanted it to be the test case.
I believe it's based on the swing of the makeup of the Supreme Court.
Many right-to-life groups see this as the opportunity to overturn it because they think they might have a majority. I don't know if that will turn out to be true or not. It seems pretty clear-cut that Gorsuch will vote against the right to abortion. And I don't know for sure about Kavanaugh, but I don't know for sure about Chief Justice Roberts either.
According to Elizabeth Nash, a state policy analyst at the Guttmacher Institute with the New York Times, the appointment of Kavanaugh focused legislatures across the country on abortion.
Some pro-life people are seeing it as an opportunity to kind of roll that back a little bit.
According to the Guttmacher Institute, quote, in 1930, abortion was listed as the official cause of death for almost 2,700 women, nearly 1/5 or 18% of maternal deaths recorded in that year. The death toll had declined to just under 1,700 by 1940 and to just over 300 by 1950, most likely because of the introduction of antibiotics in the 1940s, which permitted more effective treatment of the infections that frequently developed after illegal abortion. According to the CDC's journal, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, published in 1992, in 1972, 63 reported deaths were attributed to complications of induced abortion. Of these deaths, 38% were associated with legal-induced abortion, and 62% with illegal-induced abortion, end quote. In 1972 alone, there were 4.1 deaths per 100,000 legal-induced abortions.
In places that abortion's not legal, historically there's been some kind of black market abortions, that back alley sort of abortions that occur, which is, potentially very hazardous for the pregnant woman to have. And
from the same report in 1992 following Roe v. Wade, by 9 years, the MMWR article stated in 1990, 5 deaths attributed to legal abortions were reported, statistic being 0.3 deaths per 100,000 legal-induced abortions. The case fatality rate decreased 93% since 1972.
I've seen a lot of different numbers on how back alley abortions, as they were called, or illegal abortions were performed in the United States, how many. And I've seen kind of numbers all over the place in terms of women that had serious health risk that resulted from some of those unregulated back alley abortions.
According to the National Center of Biotechnology Information, or the NCBI, deaths from legal abortions declined 5-fold from 1973 and 1985, from 3.3 deaths to 0.4 deaths per 100,000 procedures. In a more recent MMWR by the CDC in 2012, the national legal-induced abortion case fatality rate from 2008 to 2011 was 0.73 legal-induced abortion-related deaths per 100,000 reported legal abortions. So if you look at that data, it just goes down and down and down over the course of time.
I have an older relative in my parents' generation who's talked to me about this because she ended up having to have 2 abortions for different medical reasons, but one was before it was legal and she had to have an illegal abortion. And in the state she lived in was Iowa, I think. And then one was after Roe v. Wade and it was legal, and she talked about how it was such a radically different experience because the first one was terrifying and, felt unsafe and dirty, and the second one was a completely different medical experience where she felt like her health was being protected and she was doing what she needed.
I think it's really sad that people think that they have a right to like tell women like what they can and can't do with their own like body and their like being in life.
As of May 2018, Minnesota, a historically blue state, has made it a law that a woman is required to undergo state-directed counseling, which is designed to discourage her from having an abortion and then must wait 24 hours before the procedure. Additionally, any minor who's a citizen of Minnesota who wishes to have an abortion must receive parental consent.
I think that the whole system's pretty corrupt. I don't know what we're supposed to do about that, but it's really bad, and it's really sad that it's still around, that people are still being like suppressed.
I am troubled by the perspectives that are not part of the these conversations, right? And you've seen probably some of these memes and stuff online that are, a bunch of old white men that are pushing through this legislation, and they're talking about prosecuting women, and I think that is that's kind of a troubling scenario.
On the right, you have people that are pro-life, that the real question comes down to, when does life begin, and is this murder?
Well, I honestly think that health class, everybody should learn this in middle school. People are like waiting for high school to like learn about sex and all. I think people should learn things in middle school, because now as a generation, now everybody's starting to have sex and nobody's aware of like the diseases out there and like the possibility of you getting pregnant.
I don't think that like birth control or like condoms or any of the IUD or anything like that should be banned at all. Like, that's the solution to the problem.
I think that'd be a big thing that they should probably focus on, is education in their schools and make it happen. Like, make people more aware that it's a decision to have a kid.
And this has been a brief rundown of the recent abortion laws.
Thank you for watching.